What's up? Welcome back to the Metalhead Car Show. Unless you've bought a Cybertruck, there are multiple different trim levels for pretty much every car you can go buy. Some of them being the greatest thing in the world, and some of them being downright weird. And today we're going to be looking at the ones that are downright weird. I'm not necessarily saying these cars are bad, I'm just saying these cars are strange, or their existence is kind of weird. Now, I have done a video looking at some cars that probably don't need to exist, and that's not what this video is. This is just looking at the weird. So, let's get right into it. Starting off with Hyundai. Back in 2019, Hyundai wanted to cash in on the Marvel MCU just after they released both Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. So in 2019, Hyundai released a very limited run of the Hyundai Kona Iron Man Edition. Now, the Kona Iron Man Edition was one of 300 car. It came in this gray with red, had the Iron Man face on the roof, it had arc reactors all over the interior, it had the Jarvis voice on startup, and had little Iron Man touches here and there. Someone is going to find this to be the coolest thing in the world. But here's where I find it weird. First off, releasing this in 2019 was releasing this just after Iron Man's death in Avengers Endgame, so as a character, he's kind of gone and out. Next up was the coloring. Now, the gray and red does look pretty good, I'll give them that, but the suit itself was always red and gold, so why they didn't go with that, just kind of fit the theme a bit better, is beyond me. And the last one being it's a Hyundai Kona, and by that I mean it's a Hyundai. Had this went on like an Audi TT or, well, any Audi product at all, it would make a lot more sense because that's what Iron Man drove in the series. So the fact that this went on to a Hyundai, it just comes across as weird and a bit of a cash grab. Now, I do think there's someone who picked this up, bought it brand new, maybe even pre-ordered it, and absolutely loves it. And if you bought one and you love it, good on you. I, for one, find it a bit weird. Ninth place, the Saleen XP6. Now, in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, Saleen had a huge reputation for modifying Fords. Primarily Mustangs, but they did also play with the Focus, the F-150, and the Explorer. Now, the Saleen XP8 is Saleen's modified Explorer, and truthfully, it's pretty cool, it's pretty rare, and getting a V8 in Explorer that styling is actually kind of neat. But the XP6 isn't that. Now, saying you have a 1 of 10 Saleen modded factory Ford, it's pretty cool, but when it's a 6-cylinder 90s Ford Explorer, that might not be it. As I said, there's like 10 of these in existence, and even that's a little bit debated. It's known that the production run is extremely low, and honestly, there's probably not that many that still exist today. The 6-cylinder Explorers are known to be extremely unreliable. I've never heard a single good thing about them. So with this, you'd be spending the extra money to get the Saleen badge and the Saleen styling, but also with stock V6 90s Explorer power and reliability. Much like the Kona, I'm sure there's someone who bought one and loved it, but also I need to ask why with this one. Now, when this thing came out, it was 1998, and the Ford Explorer ranged between about $20,000 and $24,000. Now, depending on what you wanted from Saleen, it was an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in mods. Now, there's a potential chance that you'd go to spend $30,098 on this unreliable 6-cylinder Saleen. I'm sure there's a market for it, but the fact that Saleen agreed to do this and it even exists at all is so weird to me. 8th place, and something kind of cool, the Mercedes R63 AMG. First thing first, these things are awesome. What's not to love about an all-wheel drive 500 horsepower minivan? These things were super low production. The production's debated, but it's said to be somewhere between 200 and 250 cars. And strange enough, there's one in my hometown, being Ottawa. And they came with that legendary 6.2 liter AMG V8. I really have nothing bad to say about this, and I think the notion of really fast minivans is super cool. I know there's someone at Dodge who always wanted to put a Hellcat engine into a Grand Caravan, but the reason why it's making the list is that it exists at all. There has been fast vans. I'm sure there's someone who optioned out like a Hemi and an old Dodge back in the day, not to go back to Dodge again, but you could only buy this car when new if you actually knew about it. Like, Mercedes didn't advertise the R63 AMG. You just had to know it existed and be willing to drop the money on this. And even if you did know that it existed and you did have the money to put down on it, you were buying a 500 horsepower V8 all-wheel drive minivan that did 60 in like 4.5 seconds. This thing's super cool, but You can't not say it is super weird. Seventh place, in kind of a similar notion, but the Volkswagen Touareg R50. Legendary car for maybe all the wrong reasons. So the Volkswagen Touareg is Volkswagen's premium SUV. It's been in production for like 20 years, and it now shares a lot of parts with the Porsche Taycan and the Audi Q series, and most likely the Lamborghini Urus as well. But the R50 especially making the list is due to the engine it had. The R50 used a 5-liter diesel V10 that made like 350 horsepower, 340 horsepower, and a absolute boatload of torque. I've actually heard rumor of people getting these, putting a tune on it, and making a really quick 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. But I'm not sure if I would do that. See, as cool as these things are, they are known and plagued for being wildly unreliable and extremely expensive to maintain. What's crazy about that is whilst I was making this list, I discovered that Volkswagen did a W12 Touareg in Europe, which is like the coolest sounding SUV ever. And I can't put that on this list because it doesn't have the reliability issues. It lasted way longer in production, and I think you could actually get parts for this thing way easier than this. Now yes, a diesel Touareg isn't that crazy, but it's the fact that it's a V10 diesel, which I'm probably guessing came kind of from the Lamborghini Gallardo in some form or another. And this is the only production car Volkswagen ever used this on, and only lasted 3 model years. It's weird that it exists at all. Sixth place, the Chevy HHR SS panel wagon. Lots of power, super low production, super weird. I do love this thing. Now the Chevy HHR is kind of a Walmart crock. It looks like a PT Cruiser, but it just has a Chevy badge on it. And it was made to be the entry-level Chevy affordable hatchback. Now the panel wagon was made to be more of a usable, utility-oriented HHR that you could use for commercial vehicles. And the SS was made to be the sporty, fast version of the HHR. So the fact that there's a HHR panel wagon that's manual only and makes like 260 horsepower from that awesome turbo 2.4 liter engine, no 2 liter engine, super cool. Obviously these things didn't sell well because the market's so niche, but those who get it, and these things are cool despite it being so weird. In fifth place, probably the most fun car on the list, the Volkswagen Golf Harlequin. Now, before we get to this, in the mid-90s, Volkswagen did this to the Volkswagen Polo, being the Volkswagen Polo Harlequin. And as that went, Volkswagen planned on making 1,000 of them, and production ended up going up to about 2,800 due to demand. So Volkswagen wanted to do this again, and they decided to do it for the 1996 Olympics as a kind of special edition Volkswagen you could buy at that time. Much like the Polo, the Golf used the exact same color scheme using very 90s colors, and unlike the Polo, the Golf kind of failed. As the Polo actually needed more cars to fit demand, the Golf only made about 260 cars, and even those didn't sell well. It actually got to the point where there's about 10 cars left, and as the story goes, Volkswagen actually pulled all of them into the shop one night and sat there mismatching panels back to the other cars to make them all one solid color so they could actually sell. So there's actually a chance that someone still owns a Volkswagen Golf Harlequin that is one solid color. Now that one's rare. I do kind of love this because it's so wacky and so 90s, but at the same time, people are boring. You weirdos like myself who like things like Bricklin Vectors, but at the same time, wackiness doesn't work with the general public, or at least it doesn't in North America. I may or may have not recently made a TikTok saying the most NPC car in the world was the Hyundai Elantra, and truthfully I do stick by that. But I say that because it's kind of just, it's a car. That's all I can give it. It is a car. And you see so many on the road. So seeing stuff like that happen and seeing the Harlequin fail, unfortunately makes sense. I love it. It's silly. It's weird. Fourth place, and I don't really think people are going to like this opinion, but the Porsche 911 992 GT3 Touring. Now, I said the whole point of this video is to look at cars that just are a bit weird, not necessarily don't need to exist, but this is like the one car on the list where I kind of don't think it needs to exist. The whole point of the GT3 is to be the ultimate track car for the 911 lineup. So making a GT3 that's softened and made for road trips and has all the features and whatnot that doesn't have the big wing kind of defeats the purpose. Go get a really high-end Carrera 2, go get a 911 Turbo, go get a Carrera 4. There are lots of options. Spending the money on a softened GT3, so what I'm going to say is no longer a GT3, doesn't make sense. And frankly, I think Porsche would have known better. Porsche does listen to its fan base, but I want to know how many people actually asked for a GT3 that was just not as good. Now, yes, it's me a whole hell of a lot faster on the track than the piece of crap I drive. Correct. But if you wanted a fast 911 that's also pretty soft and really comfortable to be in, go get a turbo. Yeah, it doesn't rev as high, it doesn't scream like the GT3. Go get a standard Carrera. Like, there's options. I think the existence of this car is weird. I truthfully don't really think it needs to exist at all. In third place, the Gucci Fiat 500. Now, Gucci's one of the biggest, most highest-end luxury clothing and apparel brands in the world. So the fact that they would make a special edition version of a entry-level hatchback is weird. Actually, adding to that, I have a computer open next to me that's showing some of the products that Gucci makes, and one of them is a handbag that costs $3,000. You could buy a secondhand Fiat 500 for that money. But that's kind of it. Putting your luxury brand name on something that's kind of worth nothing now doesn't really make sense to me. If it was a Gucci edition Maserati Quattroporte or a Maserati Gran Turismo, as much as those cars have depreciated, that makes more sense. Make a higher end version of a high end car. Give the Maserati like the nicest interior ever. That makes sense to me. Putting the Gucci name on the cheapest car humanly possible doesn't. So the fact that Fiat, who owns Maserati and Ferrari and Alfa, decided to put this on a Fiat 500, which is probably just to boost sales, is still weird to me. Next up, and the rarest car on the list, but the gold-plated DeLorean. Now yes, we know, the DeLorean is made of stainless steel. At this point now, it's actually the best built stainless steel car you can go out and buy. So the gold-plated DeLorean was a DeLorean that was plated in 24 karat gold on every single body panel, and it was sold with a huge promotion with American Express. DeLorean made 3 of these. There's a rumor to be a 4th one, but 3 are known to exist. I think these things are kind of stunning in the most over-the-top way humanly possible, because like, this is a show car. Even when it was new, you can't drive this car. But also, I assume this thing drives hideously bad. Now, one misconception about the DeLorean is a lot of people think the DeLorean was extremely heavy, but the fact is there's no paint on it, and paint actually ends up being very heavy. So the fact that it is all stainless steel means it only weighs about 2,900 pounds, as when the gold-plated DeLorean is a different story. As you may have guessed, gold is very heavy, so this thing actually weighs 9,700 pounds. I think that's a very similar weight to a Hummer H1 on a car that makes 130 horsepower. This thing would be an absolute slug. Now, if you go back in time and watch the Top Gear episode when they reviewed the Alpha 8C, one thing they said in it was, cars can't be art because art has no other purpose other than itself, which they challenged that to some extent. Now, if you look at this, it is kind of breathtaking to look at in kind of the coolest way possible, but it's going to do nothing well. The fact that it stays on its own tires is amazing. This thing's an art piece. You're not driving it anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere quickly. It is an art piece. That's why is it weird? It almost seems like it was a joke. Buying a gold-plated DeLorean as a promotion for a credit card. It sounds like a bit. It sounds like a joke. But no, it's real, and it's one of the very few cars that I think every month its value is going to change based on where gold is. And frankly, selling a car to the general public that sells gold is always going to be weird to me. And in first place, the Nissan Juke GTR. For those who don't know what this is, the Nissan Juke GTR was a Nissan Juke that is made to be wider and a little bit longer and has the drivetrain from a Nissan GTR. When this thing was first shown off to the world, it was smoking Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches around this track in what I think was Dubai. That was a one-off car, but due to that video going around, it encouraged Nissan to go make like 23, 26 of these, making it a legitimate option. And you know what? It's cool. I'm never going to take that away. But it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually go buy one of these. So you can say you have a Juke GTR, you can say you spent that much money on it, and you have one of the fastest hatchbacks in the entire world. But at the end of the day, you're still driving a Nissan Juke. It's like when Volkswagen did that W12 prototype Volkswagen Golf. Yeah, you have a 550 horsepower rear-wheel drive supercar. It's still a Volkswagen Golf. You still spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a hatchback. I don't doubt for a second that there's a few people who saw that video and wanted one immediately, but the grand scheme of things, I think this thing is super weird. Now with that, I'm gonna wrap this video up and go get my wife coffee, but before I do that, I wanna know, what do you think? Do you agree with me in saying these cars are weird, and what cars would you add to the list of just weird trim options? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed what you've seen. I post on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I'll see you later.